So it isn't morning anymore, so we don't have to worry about that. But year in, year out, and I'm going to get to where I can see one of these screens, I guess. Here, I'll stand back here. How many people think we're spending too much and not making more? We're doing a lot of that, aren't we? And so, I like this slide. It says, not just what we look at, it's what we see. And I was telling some of these guys when I went up there and looked at the avocados the first time, and I'm on the side by side for a couple hours, and I get back down there, and it's from about 1,500 feet to 3,500 feet, and he's got 4 or 5 faces of it, and I get off the side by side, and we both did that. He said, what's going on? I said, well, I would tell you that if you was in the Midwest and we were in a pig barn, you got biofilm buildup. We need to open that up and blow out the junk. You got a Dead Sea going on there with no nutrition. So when I was showing this to Tony, and I'm sitting there staring at that stem, he says, look at that lateral rut. Somebody else says, look at the branches. Somebody else says, look at the beans. So we all have a bias or a preconceived notion. So everything we do runs through what we have previously known, right? This is the repeat side of it. How many people here know what cacophony is? I didn't know that word. How many people here was in band in school? What'd you play?
A lot of instruments. Started with the saxophone, though.
There you go. When Mama came, did she hear the saxophone?
No.
No? See, you're supposed to play really loud so Mom can hear. That's how I make my point.
They had me play outside.
Oh, it's like going to church one Sunday morning. Dad said, I think you ought to sing solo today, son. He said, I think you ought to sing solo and nobody hears you. So anyway, cacophony says, whatever I do, somebody's going to hear me. We have way too many companies out here thinking they're the answer. And none of us are the answer. Our job is to bring bits and pieces together so that eventually you get your symphony, right? And I can give you a set of this when I'm all done. I'll just burn you a set. You don't have to worry about it. So when we look at the soils here, you know, and all the things that are going on above the ground, below the ground, what can we recycle? What can we look at? I started out here, I used to give a 10-cent soil lesson. And it starts out with how many people here pull their own soil? And there's one. And how many people are in the field when it gets pulled? And I give this speech, and there's 5 hands maybe to start with, and I might gain one more. And I said, would it be nice to know if you got a tile line that blew out, or you got a weed getting out of control, or you got a waterway or a terrace that's falling apart, or that the kid didn't just take one shovel full of dirt and put it in 5 bags because he gets paid by the acre? Or would it be nice to know if the probe actually went in the ground 4 inches? Because part of soil sampling is learning the fields, learning how they lay, learning where the different soil types are, learning what's going on. Because when we talk about sending the soil into the lab, and I see it's going to be a little bit different here with what Precision is now into the soil sampling business, maybe not into the micros yet, but kind of like what I saw the other day when I was down here on what they're going to do for your NPK, calcium, some of those kinds of things. 5 grams worth of dirt makes your P1 reading, the weight of that dime. So if that ground isn't very representative of what you're sending in there, we're getting ready to make thousands of dollars worth of decisions on not very much information. And so sometimes we just got to know what we don't know on how we're making those decisions. And I can burn one of these for anybody that wants one of these here toward the end. So one of the things, does soil type or cultural practices have a larger effect on the soil? And when I went out with Kyle and some of you guys know out to Kearney, Nebraska back in March, and we're having a meeting, and the guy says, I've been no-till irrigated 15 years, my water won't go in the ground. Well, I went back and started thinking about things I'd learned from Dana Dines and Dan Alt from USDA Ag Research, ARS out there in Ames, Iowa. Because I had to go down to the Missouri River where what used to be the 100-year floodplain, we had gone over the banks 4 times in 10 years. So obviously it was no longer going to be the 100-year floodplain. We had 25 foot of water out there 4 times. Is that compaction? I thought that would be massive compaction, so I stopped to say, how do I address this? What they taught me was, if you think about the iron that's 2 pluses, not the iron, it's 3 pluses. 3 is a bully, 2 is my friend, 2 helps hold my aggregates together. Once soil is saturated, that kern turns loose or solubilizes, just like glue on the back of a paperback book. Heads off down the stream. That lets all my clays go back and lay flat. So what this guy was telling me was he had overindulged in his water applications to where he had soaked these iron 2 plus loose. He in fact had a plow pan on the surface. And because he was a no-tiller, where did all the fertilizer go? On top. Where did all the calcium go? On top. And I said, you know, a little boy grew up in southwest Missouri, but we used to call calcium chloride concrete. So now we have concrete sitting on top of a plow pan on top of the ground. He's asked me why the water's not going through it. And we got to have oxygen, right? 2025 is the year to only incur 60 to 70% of your money up front. Now, I'm not telling you that we shouldn't have it in reserve, but every year something happens. We run out of nitrogen. We replant. We have a hailstorm. And the University of Illinois this year said if we gave $300 an acre for cash rent in here, and we sold our corn at $4.80, and we took the typical yield for Illinois, we might lose $4 an acre. How many people got all their corn sold $4.80 and above? So my part of sustainability says I would rather keep everybody in this room in business than I would go out and cold call. I would rather come buy you a coffee and a barbecue and sit down and talk grandkids and what we're going to do next year than I would to go up and beat up and down the roads and try and figure out the next guy I'm going to pull into has a dog that's going to eat my back pocket or if he's going to pay his bills. How much dry P&K can I afford for 2025? The question becomes, if we're going to do that in the fall, that is guaranteed money that we have spent. I'm trying to decide this year, and the reason I've got that over on the other side is to talk about the potassium side of it. Should I save some dollars for the in-season amendments? And I am a big proponent of that every year. Maybe this year a little more so than some of the other years. I'm a real proponent of residue management. Not only do we recycle it, how many people have diseases in the fields that if we don't recycle the nutrition, we just gave it a free house to come back and bite us again next year? And don't buy what you can recycle. Because if you look at those potassium forms, if we are short, and we always are here, we can come out here and depending on how good of a negotiator you are, how much you buy, where you buy it, potassium acetate you can buy now for $6 to $8. 1 gallon potassium acetate will move the needle on beans. So I would rather spend $8 there than I would trying to build my potassium numbers for next year. We're migrating my person. Too many people have ruined the biological term for the companies, right? The boys out there in Idaho, Oregon area, I think it was Oregon, maybe offered people to bring in 100 different jugs of bugs in a jug and see what's in it. I do believe that every one of those had at least what they said was in there because everybody usually under guarantees what they think's in their jug. But then they run out of oxygen, they run out of food source, they break dormancy, something happens. 7 out of 100 jugs met or exceeded what was on the label the day that they opened them all up and looked at them. Too many people's got to run in that company. So I started branding myself as I want to be an energy company that uses biology to drive it. And everything I can bring to the field that is ready to go, that doesn't have to be changed, then conserves energy. That's actually one of the bucking bulls I fed on the animal nutrition side. We're not looking for weight, we're looking for energy.
You'd be the one that jumped out of the pen, Jordan, or...
And he would be the one that jumped out, yeah. Very few people like to sit on a bull that was pointed that direction. So, again, to me, nutrition's really simple. We're long on something, we're short on something, it's tied up or it's in the wrong form. And sometimes it is, we're short of oxygen. Sometimes we're short of beneficial fungi, right? More so than bacteria typically. How many people here check their ground for cobalt or moly or nickel? Cobalt and moly go into forming the UAN type of nitrogens. Nickel needs to be out there for the ureas if we're going to be using some urea, those kind of things. How about, now don't do that. How about anybody here using something like the Invitas and the phenoms, the bacteria that are in the leaves and pull nitrogen through the leaf? I've been using those for 2 or 3 years now. I love them because they're not plant specific. So when we went down to the Rio Grande and they do all transplant watermelons down there, they got a little 128 cube things with all the watermelons in there. We could put biology and nitrogen fixers on 300 acres worth and use 4 gallons of material before they went to the field. As soon as those nodules quit, if you got a green leaf on a soybean, you're still pulling nitrogen through there until every last green leaf falls off. Part of getting those beans bigger. Part of being on that corn plant. If we don't have water, nitrogen doesn't move, potassium doesn't move. Wherever my roots quit, once I've mined that, that's what I've got until it rains. Either we have to bring nutrition toward it, we have to grow the roots back out because plants always support new growth in either their seeding, fruiting, whatever. So if we are short, especially last year, and the beans was looking ugly and we got a shower and everybody called me 2 days later and said the beans look worse than they did before the rain. They started growing again with no nutrition. So what did they have to, as an option? Cannibalize. When we look at those brown spots in there, I'm one of these people who believes brace roots are because we overfed nitrogen amounts too much at one time. When Mr. Sauter over here used to have his field days, and one year he decided he was going to do a light interception thing, so he planted 18,000, 28, 38, and 48,000, and he put 230 pounds of nitrogen up front. You think that was too much for 18,000 plants? Some of those were trying to throw 4, 5, and 6 sets of brace roots. The 38s and 48s not quite as bad. But you look in there and you can see that little brown area. Once that thing gets plugged up, how are we going to get any nutrition past it? So they went up and they threw a set. You can kind of see that next little brown ring starting in there, so he's already starting to throw another set of brace roots up there. Go down where he's from, and we're talking about onions. What happens if I plug my onions roots? I pull that onion out of the ground, he's too wet. He needs to dry down some before that goes into the grocery store. Anybody ever found an onion about 3 rows in, 3 rings in, it's rotten? Root was plugged, couldn't get rid of that excess moisture. Same thing in corn. If we've got plugged and we're not taking nutrition up, once we hit black layer, how are we going to shove any water back down it? Not going to happen. So the beauty of this is a delivery system that says you got the ability to put the nitrogen out there at any one time, spread it out, you'll find out you don't lose near as much of it, and you'll find out your natural dry down comes back. I love a humic base. Things humics do is they provide bonding sites. Sands have none. Clays are too tight. So it's a natural toxin binder. It's a great chelator. Holds about 20 times its weight in water. It's a carbon food source. 60 plus micronutrients, you get some auxins in it. And it facilitates soil structure to get rid of some of the anaerobic soils. You go to Dalhart, Texas. Too much iron, too much magnesium, too much aluminum. Whatever the pH is, if you get your colloids too big, you have trouble getting your air and your water to go down past them. So if we take something like a growthful, that sulfuric acid with water stabilized at 0, kick all those hydrogens loose, pop things loose, humics are amphoteric. They have the ability to grab a hold of excess anions. They have the ability to grab a hold of excess cations. So as they stabilize them, eventually they go through the profile. But in the meantime, we've shrunk the colloid. Now the air and the water go through. Now the roots go down farther. The farther the roots go down, the farther the exudates go down. The farther the exudates go down, the lower the biology can live, because now there's more oxygen down there. Your worms come back and things start getting better. This was an interesting scenario to me. White mold, and everybody's pretty much given up on things once we get white mold. You can take a product that's analyte water or hypochlorous acid, an HOCl molecule. If I can open that canopy and I can spray that in the first 24 to 36 hours, I have been able to grow beans above that. I don't know if we'd be able to do that coming up through the drip. It would be something I would love to know. But we do have a machine that's sitting across the road here now that has the ability to, it's got down pressure, it's got gauge wheels. It was set up to do nitrogen, shoot it right at the base of the plant, and had the disc blades then set to put a little bit of soil right back over it. Once I know I've got a machine that I can hold to the ground, and I can put guards on there and open that up, put a spray nozzle on there and hit that bottom 4 inches. I think there's going to be some potential for that. That's this hydronium. So it's basically hydrogen on a zip drive. The other thing they do with that is they're using it in Mama's Cosmetics, because every time that hits her lips, hits her cheeks, or whatever else, you're introducing bacteria. I think it might be something else we can look at to keep your lines open. This flower pot, I thought we was going to talk about that a little bit out there, maybe when we was talking about having that top 4 or 5 inches pretty much waterlogged. If you put the dry dirt in there, and the red soil water takes that bonding sites, all of them in the top, so when you go back in and you kick yellow in there, it goes straight through and right on beyond it. When I started looking at that concept, I said sometimes when we were wet, in southern Minnesota was wet this year, as soon as those guys could get back in and wanted to get out and get their Y dropping done, did they just take that UAN, shoot it through the waterlogged area right below the roots? I'm thinking we've done some of those things maybe without thinking about them before. But if that nutrition is tied with the water in that top 4 to 6 inches, can I then shoot some more water through it to fill up my profile down below that if I don't run myself out of oxygen? And that is one of the times that we can kind of do some recharge water. Let's see if I can make this thing do that. See that, Taylor? What does that say about soil structure? He sat there and wiggled that shovel on both sides of that plant and was able to lift a 28, 29 inch root intact out of that soil. How many people can do that in this room? When the soil structure is right, you can have that kind of fun with the shovel. I'm going to talk 2 seconds about the soil probes. They first came out and they were putting them in, taking them out, putting them in, taking them out. I kind of like the concept of the probe that stays in there just a little bit from this position. You get into some of the dry areas where they hardly have enough water to irrigate anyway, and it hasn't been raining there the last 2 or 3 years. If we know we're only sitting on about 40 to 60% of the water we need, we'll make adjustments up front if we have that option. But we also know if you got corn looking at it like this out here, and we're just about done with the fill system, now we know we've got enough water to finish it up. And now we can go ahead and market more of that grain than we've been comfortable marketing before, because we know we've got the nutrition in the water there to take care of it. This came from one of those. This happens to be up west of Oshkosh. And so you can see up there the little purplish line had a rain, started recharging, but we're also filling hard enough down here that we weren't gaining anything as we got farther down. Over here, you know exactly where your roots are. If you watch your low water levels go down, you know how, and if we do believe that soil is stratified in nutrition, or if we know what they are in that first, however far you think you can send roots, I think we'll be able to figure out what to send through the water biologically or as enzymes or whatever it's going to take to get the best out of every one of those situations wherever we've got fertility land down there. And so we always talk about risk, and I kind of turned that into it's a responsible implementation of sensible knowledge that we have to work with. How many people here like the roots on the left? If I had to choose one, would you choose the left one, the center one, or the right one? Or if you can do all three. Because now we can put one set of biology on the seed, one in with the dust in the planter box, another one in the furrow, or we can come back with a really early foliar and get some of this stuff to happen. We have more options and more ways to make things work than we ever had. We did 15,000 acres of corn last year where we did a box-to-box overtreater. So we had two things on it. We put a different one again in the planter box. Because you can do planter box things now, and you can kick the mycorrhiza in there, you can kick the Bavarian Bassianas in there, you can kick trichodermas in there, you can kick phosphorus solubilizers, potassium solubilizers, along with your bradyrhizobiums. Very easy way to get some of this stuff in there. And now we have a much better chance of being able to stack that kind of stuff. I've always liked hair roots. I've always liked getting my nodules out as early as I can. In this little picture up here, there was one time in John Deere's life where they actually cared about something besides steel. That came out with John Deere magazine about 40 years ago. Get things off and running. You want to know how quick to feed them? We got a guy over here on the end that's already done a pretty good job taking off for no more above ground growth than he has. Bigger stalk diameters. The bigger the stalk diameter, I would say the less resistance to getting material to move up and down. Based on that theory, I got to using 13 essential oils in things that I do. If there's a time to spray that I think is a wonderful time, it's right before an electrical storm. The ergs tell the stomata to open up. I think we can provide some of our own ergs. We can think about things that we know work in us or work in animals. Do they work in the plants? That's part of my what ifs. If I know that the higher the capsaicin in peppers is, speeds up metabolism, would that work? If I know that yarrow relaxes my blood vessels for less restriction on fluid transport, would that work? If I know that echinacea stimulates the body's natural immune system, would that work in the root zone? If I know that garlic and peppermint chase off some of my bugs, why not have some of them in there? And we're talking 5 cc's in the carrier across 160 acres. Just a second slide on those ugly roots, just so you don't forget that we don't overindulge in nitrogen at one time. So this might be the one important slide out of the whole deal. How many people here sit down with everybody that needs to help them make a decision at least once a year? So that you don't leave and the banker says, well, I wish I'd have been there, or the fuel man says, I wish I'd have been there, or the equipment guy says, I suppose you talked about you don't need anything from me this year. What if we had all those guys sitting at one table? At least once a year, maybe twice. Kind of figure out that this is the pie, right? Because you can only cut the pie so many ways and the pie is empty. Even the road commissioner, because sometimes he decides whether or not you can sell in the winter, right? Anyway, he does here. Get the residue management right, get things going. I like the ruts on the left. This over here is just something that my concept of nutrition says one side doesn't fit all. So I sit down with people, what are you long on, what are you short on, what do you want to do, what's your budget, how many times you're going out, how many ways have we got to look at it, and everything can be built custom as you go. These are all the people that want to do something with sulfur. And the first people that need sulfur is the biology. So if you're shorting yourself on sulfur, they're going to take it before they release it. But if we have it out there, most of your elements have a sulfate form. I am a proponent of using sulfates in solutions when I can, because to me EDTA is not a chelator, it is a tank compatibility agent. It says we can put 4 things in the tank and they don't fall out because they don't touch each other. And when you're holding something that tight, you're probably not going to get much more than 20% of it inside of a plant. And because I was taught that Mother Nature does not live in a vacuum. When that EDTA chelator turns that material loose, is there something else I wanted inside that plant that's going to reattach to it? Oop, jump 2. So dry fertilizers, fall, springs, liquids. I know it's nice for the fertilizer guys to come out here and spread dry in the fall. It's also nice for some of my phosphates to get a hold of the calciums and tie themselves right back up. And I got to wait for it to get to be 50 degrees before we can go again. Anybody here use 1034O? Thank you. When we put biology with Roundup, we killed 25% of it. When we put biology with 1034O, it was 100% lethal. So when he's talking about humics and some of these things, humics need to stay above 6.5 pH. A lot of the other things want to be down there in that 3 range. So the beauty again of the drip systems is we have enough times going out there that we don't have to make those choices. Do one today, do one 2 or 3 days from now. They all need to be in the soil. The thing in the middle says 19 plant nutrients. How many people here have sat down with a nutrition person from wherever you get your fertilizer and you've talked about 19 different things we're going to address this year? Not typically. That's one of the reasons that I like the sea minerals. You got 92 things out there. You don't have a lot of some of them, but maybe they are the short barrel stave, and one of them that I get that way is my selenium. And all of the Midwest is short on selenium. And anybody that has livestock needs selenium. We used to call that slip tendons in the chickens. You'd have a cow that was within 2, 3, 4 weeks of calving, and she'd slip a calf out and he wasn't living. He didn't have any selenium. The bottle calves down there in New Mexico, when we brought them off of the milk replacer to put them on the feed, and they weren't very interested in eating. I put a quart in 25 gallon of water, stirred it up. They took a drink, they was ready to eat. He said, what'd you do? I said, you're in a drought. You had no selenium in your forage, you had no selenium in your grain. PGRs, you talked about those a little bit. The guy that's hit the 200 bushel beans 2 years in a row would tell you he's got some auxins out there every time he's doing something. Keeping the roots stimulated, keep them growing, keep them hungry, keep them feeding. Talked about the little scanner out there a while ago. I don't know if is it worth $15,000? You better be using it quite a bit. Does it help us make some decisions once we've kind of maybe verified that out a little bit? This is all the individual scans. I went out there one day and we took 230 scans in a 4-hour time frame. How many people are going to look at 240 different plants before you send them into the tissue test? So when they say, well, how valid is this? I said, I don't know. Jason said he sent 30 leaves in. He's going to make a lot of decisions on 30 leaves. Is 230 better than 30? If we can verify them. As an agronomist, I see that I have 4 things to do. become a observant set of outside eyes to look at something you might have walked by 4 or 5 times and not figured out why and not ask anybody else what really is going on here. We've all got to make sound, economical, sustainable recommendations to stay in business right now. Identify deficiencies, toxicities, tie-ups, fix those problems, keep abreast of the new technologies, and saying this new thing is out here, but somebody's already taken all the margin. There's nothing left in it for you. Or the reason this thing is cheap, it's all water, it's all sugar. There's nothing in it. When sugars first became the hot thing, I went into a guy's shed and 4 people had sold him something that was basically a sugar source. You're not going to grow a good crop on only sugar. So find these guys that you can trust, ask them questions, and realize that when you start out on some of these new adventures, don't go and try and go straight up, because you fall off, you get discouraged, and you don't try again. Take a couple of steps. Take a rest. Analyze it. Was that a good idea? How much more of this do I want to do? Now try something to add on to it. I tell people all the time that I do things on proof concept. I want to find something. This is the result I'm looking for. Did I find it? How many people here like that 3-year data? How many people like 3-year data at your house? See, I tell people all the time, again, growing up in southwest Missouri, I know we weren't Illinois, but we found it really hard to have 3-year data till you had 1-year data. We found it extremely hard to have 3-year data at your house if I hadn't been there. And so if I'm supposed to spend 5 or 10% of my budget on research and development, then maybe you need to take a few rows, a couple of swipes, try something new. Try 3 or 4 things on a couple of swipes. Don't ruin your groceries, but learn. Because we don't want to get stagnant. I'm all done. Questions? Anybody that wants a set of those, we'll bring you one.